you want to see it, we will have that up on our YouTube channel. So within about 24 hours, we'll have this posted for those that want to see that. Other thing, for those of you guys familiar with how we've run these in the past, we do have a agenda outline. So if there's some topics, we will not leave the room without addressing whatever your burning questions are. The main topics that we've got on our agenda today is we are looking to give you an update on COVID. It's better news than I've shared before, so that's good to hear. We're going to tell you a little bit about our planning for next year, and that's going to include a lot of the feedback. We really appreciate how many of you had responded to our surveys and shared information, and so I'll give you some information on how we're doing academically, mental health wise, programmatic, and a lot of perceptions and feelings from staff and parents who've shared with us. So we'll do that. And then we have some miscellaneous topics to update you on, including our state testing, some events, programmatic things we've got here, a little bit about the board, job opportunities here at San Pasqual. So a whole bunch of things. But this is about giving you guys the information you need. So feel free to put any questions that you have in there. I thank those of you who submitted your questions in advance so that we can address those. But we'll get going. Like I said, Mrs. Hanson is our co-host. So if you have any chat stuff, she will make sure that I get those messages as we go through. So starting up, COVID, wanted to update you on that. The good news about COVID is that we've had no overt challenges from the removal of masks. For those of you who are part of this process throughout, masks have definitely been a topic of discussion, topic of debate, and a little bit of contention. The masks went from being mandated at schools to being strongly recommended at schools on March 14th. And like I said, we have not seen, with that lessening of the restrictions, we have not seen any consequences to it, adverse consequences. To give you a little perspective on how COVID has affected school here at San Pasqual, in January, we had 121 cases in January. So 121 COVID cases that were either students or staff that affected the school. So about 20% of the people who come to school regularly had COVID in January. So it's really high numbers. It doesn't mean that all of them came to school with COVID, but it affected about 20% of our school population. In February, that dropped down to 27 cases. In March, we only saw 3. And like I said, in March 14th, the mask mandate dropped. And what we saw here at school initially was a handful of folks continued to wear those masks on the recommendations. I would say that for students and staff, it was probably somewhere between 10 and 20%. We've seen a little bit of lessening on that. There was some concerns when the mask mandate was dropped that there'd be some bullying or pressure on one side or the other to encourage people to do it or to make fun of people who were. We didn't see any of that. So we did try to preempt that a little bit with our families as far as messaging from home. And I think that really helped. And so the good news is we are past that mandate by a month and a half, and March cases were 3 and April cases have been 6. So we have 6 cases in April, but of those 6 cases, 5 of those are non-school impact, meaning 5 out of the 6 were kids or staff members who contracted COVID, but were never on campus when they were COVID positive. So only 1 case required that sending out of close contact notices. So we're in really good shape. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination it's over, but it does mean that we've moved into a place right now where it's not having the impact that it's had. So we're continuing to follow the guidelines of the CDPH and local health department. The decision tree, which kind of affects how we quarantine or isolate or restrictions from school, that continues to have more and more freedom in there, for lack of a better term, meaning that there's more options to test, either to stay at school or to test and get back to school quicker. Mrs. Lee's done a really good job of keeping us supplied with test kits. So there's opportunities to do a lot more opportunities to do home tests. And those home tests now are permissible for pretty much every circumstance. Is that right, Ms. Lee? May 2nd? Yeah, so it's permissible to come back to school early. It's permissible for people to stay at school if they've been exposed. So the home tests are now being counted the same way that the PCR and the antigen tests that we do here at the school. We still have the lab here at the school operational, but we do far less tests than we've done before, in part because we have far fewer cases and the home tests are able to be used for that. So that is good news on that. The next piece that I wanted to talk to you guys about is the vaccinations, because that has also been a very hot topic among our school community, especially as they were moving to a potential mandated vaccine for school attendance and for staff to come to school. When we last met, there was a mandate that what was the date? July 1st of this year, that students 12 and older would need to be vaccinated to come back to school next year. I was kind of downplaying that with a lot of our school community because there was a personal belief exemption. So if people didn't want to do it, they say, I don't want to do it, and they can move on. There was some fear that this would be legislated into, fear by some that it would be legislated into a requirement for school attendance, similar to the other vaccines that kids have to get. A lot's happened politically, and they've moved that date from July 1st of this year to July 1st of next year. So they've kind of kicked the vaccine conversation down the road. Hopefully, COVID will be less of a concern a year from now, a year plus from now, and they may make other decisions. So our goal is to keep kids safe and to comply with what's going on. We have discussed this with the leadership, with our school board, and they are amenable to the personal belief exemption as long as it's permitted. And under the current dynamic of July 1st of 2023, the personal belief exemption would still be there. The only way that that gets taken out is that if it goes through and becomes law and is built into the regular vaccines. So right now, vaccines not going to be required of kids to come to school in the coming school year. There are still vaccination requirements for staff members and volunteers here at the school. And that requirement is either if you're employed at the school or you volunteer at the school, there's a requirement to be fully vaccinated or to test weekly. And so our staff members and our volunteers who are not vaccinated, they're part of a weekly testing protocol. They've been doing that here with us, but come the beginning of May, they'll have an option to do that at home as well. So yes.
Does that include booster or is that just the first two?
No, just the first two. Yeah, and I'm probably using the wrong term now because they went from, I try to think what the terminology was, but fully vaccinated used to be the 2, and then there's a booster and then a booster on the booster, but there have not been any requirements to do anything beyond the 1 or 2 shots, depending on what the regimen was for the vaccination. There's talk of removal of that requirement, but like I said, we haven't got there yet. And it is very impactful for us. You know, we have a lot of volunteers here at the school. And out of those volunteers, we have some folks that don't volunteer or don't volunteer as much as they normally would because of that requirement. So from getting more people involved, more parents involved, that would help us if we got to that point. There is a little bit of confusion with some between folks who are coming to volunteer and folks that are coming to school to attend an event. And so there is a difference between how those things are managed. If folks are coming to volunteer, meaning they're interacting with kids, whether that's here on campus or on a field trip, they're subject to the same vaccination or test within a week requirement. But if they're coming to attend an event where they're not interacting with kids, so for instance, a meeting like this, sports events, performances, those kind of things, parents can come and be part of it without the vaccination requirement. We just keep parents and kids separate during those events. So there was a little confusion on that. Next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. Any questions? Any questions come up on COVID or vaccinations or masks? All right, I was gonna say, well done. Yeah, I'll keep sharing only good news, so. All right. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about, and I'm gonna look to share my screen for this one here, is to talk to you guys a little bit about our data that we received. Let me do. Let's see if that is doing what it needs to do. That is, it's looking right on here. Okay, good. So we collected a lot of information over the course of the past year. Some of it was tied to academics and some of it was tied to student wellness, safety here at school, parent engagement. And we did that through a couple means. The assessment stuff, a lot of it was kids taking tests and tracking that. And then a lot of the other information that we got was through our LCAP survey and through our California Healthy Kids survey. And so this information here is a little feedback loop to you guys to kind of let you know what some of this information was for us and how it relates to the 4 goals that we have. So for those of you guys who have been in these groups before, you're aware that we have 4 LCAP goals. The LCAP is the local control accountability plan. And it basically sets forth what are the school's main initiatives and what's the budget set forth for those, and what are the metrics? What are we measuring success by? So it's a really long, boring document, but it does drive a lot of important things. And so within there, the 4 goals can really be summed up pretty easily. The first one's about academics. How are kids learning? How are they doing academically? The second one is really about student wellness, and it's about students being kids of character and confidence. So it's a student wellness goal, and it's a more of a rounded perspective of kids. So we look at not just educating kids so that they're good students, but we want them to be good people, and we want them to be well-adjusted people. And so this was a goal we were putting in pre-pandemic, but some of the results you'll see really important for us now. So the mental health and the student wellness issue is a real challenge at the moment. The third one is about safety, and it's about how safe people are here and how the campus looks and are we taking care of it and all that kind of stuff. And then the fourth one on there is about engagement. How do we get parents more engaged? How do we tag into partners within the community to provide better opportunities for kids? So I'll briefly give you a couple things that we talked about. I shared a larger presentation. Pamela wanted a little bit more information in there, but I shared a larger presentation with the school board. So there's more detail in this with the school board, but this one here is an abbreviated. So if you want more, we've got that for you, but we'll go through some. But the big thing on academics is COVID put a hit on academics, and you've read about it before in the newspapers and publications about what they're calling learning loss. And that stuff's real. What we saw when we did our CASP test from year to year is we saw tremendous gains in the 2018, so 17-18 school year, into the 18-19. So we saw really big bumps in student academics. So we saw, if you look at this chart here, you'll see 3 different lines. The blue one is the English language arts line, the yellow one is the math, and the purple one's the science. And so you'll see a couple things on here. You'll see we had really big gains in the 18-19 testing period. And then COVID hit. And so we didn't get a 19-20 score. And then the 2021 score was an abbreviated test. So only about 20% of the schools in San Diego County actually took the CASP test. We wanted to take it because we wanted to get some like-for-like measure to start identifying where some of these needs are. We see real sporadic information on student academic growth on our internal assessments. And one of those challenges were a lot of those internal assessments were done at home. And so some parents are smarter than their 3rd or 4th grade students and may have assisted them a little bit. So we see some inconsistency in some of these results. And so we wanted something that could be taken, even if it wasn't exactly the same thing, to try to get like for like measure. And you can see what's not moving. Oh, it's not moving on the screen. Yeah, let me check to see. I think the PowerPoint's not moving on the Zoom. Let me see if I can get out of there in just a second, see if I can come in with a different share.
It wasn't on the presenter slide or presenter view.
Thank you. Let's see if I can get it to that. Is it there? And it,
Perfect. Thank you.
perfect, thank you. And then does it advance? Excellent. All right. Technology is wonderful. So we are looking at from last year to this on the CASP testing, seeing declines, and we saw declines in maths and declines in language arts. But like I said, we're seeing these inconsistent stuff as far as what we're seeing here. We did see some encouragement in that the first year that the science assessment was given was in that 2019 year. And we saw some good gains in the science proficiency, but we're still striving to do higher in that. The science proficiency scores statewide are much lower. It's a brand new test on newly adopted standards, and the format of that test throw a lot of kids off. So the more we learn about that, we've adopted some new science materials for elementary school. But the COVID stuff is real. Some encouraging news that we're, oh, one more piece. And it's also real when you look at kids, second language learners, kids that maybe didn't have as much access to home supports, we're seeing more drastic reductions. So this screen here is the summit of LPAC, and the LPAC is the test that we do annually with our English learners to talk about the development of their language. And you can see that over the COVID time period, you've seen that kids are dropping. So from 18 to 19, pretty level proficiency. Kids who are moderately or well-developed, those are kind of the proficient or advanced as far as kids moving on their language. But between that 19 test and then the 2021 test, you're seeing a slower development of kids in their English language. So one of the things that we've done on that is we've hired a full-time English language teacher. Mrs. Eigen is doing that for us this year and putting a lot more supports for our English learners to try to remediate some of that. You can see that we're not alone. The state is seeing similar drops, and the state also sees kids not as well developed in their language as they are here. But we want to get that back up so that we can capture that before the kids become what's categorized as LTELs, which is the long-term English learners, kids that are taking 4 to 5 years to develop or more to develop English language proficiency. And that's one of the big targets. You know, if we have a kid that comes to us in kindergarten, they should be proficient in their language a few years after they come here, so that they can access everything that they English speakers can access. We are seeing some encouraging things. I mentioned before about some of our internal assessments, and we were able to do on our MAP testing, the measures of academic progress, focus in on our third grade reading. Third grade reading is a pivotal benchmark for future success. Studies consistently show that students not proficient at third grade reading have less of a chance of finishing high school and college, have more of a chance to end up in jail, all sorts of stuff. And so we're really focusing on third grade reading proficiency. And so one of the things that we did in there is we took our reading specialist position, we made that as a full-time position. We added another instructional aide to be dedicated fully to reading. We have a very robust volunteer program, mostly comprised of former teachers from here that are doing Everyone a Reader. And so we're tiering off that reading support with really heavy emphasis in 1st through 3rd grade, because our goal is to get as many students proficient by the end of 3rd grade. And then that way we can continue to concentrate our resources at the lower end and not be chasing kids that are up. So we're seeing some encouraging news there. In this academics, and in addition to student scores, we also surveyed folks as far as what they think about the school. And so this is a little longitudinal thing that goes from the 2020 year, 2021, and the 2022. And this is the LCAP survey that we shared out. And if you kind of look at the quality of education here, you're seeing some fairly consistent marks, but people were a little bit less happy with the quality of education while we were either in those COVID mitigations or kids were only going to school part day or no day. So we are seeing this increase each year. This slide is a little interesting because the 2021 was prior to the shutdown. And then we saw parents a little bit happier with it, perhaps for the effort that was being done into 2021 and then a little bit more into 2022. So some good feedback as far as parents' perception of education. And then we flipped it and said, okay, what's the quality of teaching? How do you feel about the teaching that your kids are getting? And so when we see this, again, we see some similar trends that from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, in your different groups, you're looking at the quality of teaching that's coming in. The teacher ratings of the teachers are interesting because that 2021 year, you see, Foley, and I think that's reflective of they were working really hard and you guys were working really hard at home. And so we see the teacher ratings kind of moving around a little bit, but we see some consistency in some of the other areas. And we asked the students too. The students also saw a little bit of a drop, but they're still seeing a little bit now. So I don't know exactly what that's about. This is a question that we ask kids that we always find interesting. And it's more to get a feel for what they're resonating to. And this is, what's your favorite subject, what's your least favorite subject? Fourth grade, they either love or hate math and writing because those are the tops in both areas. I think it's a testament to fourth grade teachers that you have so many kids that have a love of writing because it's a hard task. And so it's nice to see that being up there on there. When you move into middle school, you have a love-hate relationship with math. So you kind of, some folks really enjoy math and some don't. And then on the flip side, you have a lot of high rankings in middle school for our history social studies program. And I think that's a testament. Mr. Harmon teaches all those 6th, 7th, and 8th. He's a good storyteller. He connects it to things that kids are interested in, does fun tasks with them. So interesting information there. So taking some of that information that we got about academics, where is that driving us as far as into this next year? Like I mentioned before, we're going to continue the supports through the full-time reading specialist and the EL teacher and the Everyone a Reader, really focus heavily on that reading, especially in the primary. We're looking at extended day and extended year tutorials. So there's a program that's coming in that you'll see come into play next year, abbreviated as ELOP, E-L-O-P, and it stands for Expanded Learning Opportunity Program. And that ELOP provides money to schools targeted for kids in TK through 6th grade that fall into specific categories. And those would be kids of limited economic means, kids living in poverty, English speakers, foster youth. And there's money donated in there to extend the school day to a 9-hour school day. And so it's meaning 9 hours of programming. It's not kids in class for 9 hours. Like, it would be a little bit of a challenge. The 6, 7 that we have now is challenging enough for some. But it takes it as extends that school day. And right now we have an extended school day 2 days a week for our English learners. So an additional hour in the day, English learners stay, they get additional support in their language development, homework help, that kind of stuff. So expect to see next year this program expand to 5 days a week and go for 2 to 3 hours after the school day. We're still trying to figure out some of the logistics. Staffing is tight right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Transportation is difficult. And so there's some challenges that we have, but that's the direction that we're moving. This ELOP program also provides funding to do beyond school year activities. So summer breaks, that kind of thing. So expect to kind of see some of this programming put in that it'll probably look part academic, part campy, some fun enrichment type stuff. So expect to see some of those things in. So that's one of the things that we believe that will help some of the academics, because the groups that are being targeted in this for support are the groups that we see that are lagging behind academically. So we'll hopefully be able to make some good use of that funding. One of the other things that will be changing for next year is resuming teacher professional development. So we curtailed our professional development significantly over the last 2 years. First year, professional development was all on how do we do distance learning right, and how do we have time to do that. And then in this year, especially as we went through the fall and into January, with all the in and out of students coming in and staff coming in, it was really just taxing the ability to take those weekly professional developments that we have scheduled. So part of our school schedule and school calendar is teachers meet for about an hour once a week. And so we curtailed that to give them a little bit more time. So we'll be bringing that stuff back in. So we're looking forward to that. And then when we looked at, I showed you kind of kids' favorite type stuff. We also looked at some of our survey questions centered around what are some of the curricular areas of need. And the things that came out consistently were the history, social studies, and the writing. And so the two main themes on that is history, social studies. We were planning on adopting new curriculum about 2 years ago. And if you remember, about 2 years ago, the world fell out, or the bottom fell out, and the world shut down. And so we put that on hold. And so we're piloting some history stuff in the middle school right now. And we're looking at hopefully a pilot into next year and an adoption by the end. So we'll bring up our history curriculum to be a little bit more contemporary. And then the writing, middle school has been piloting a new writing program, EB Writing, this year. They found some success, actually 5th through 8th, found some success in that. And we're going to look to see how we vertically articulate writing. So we'll put a couple committees together to explore that. The next goal that we had was the student wellness goal. And there's been a lot of anecdotal information that we've had about kids that have been struggling as a result of the pandemic. And what we've seen in our data is, you know, we do surveys of 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders. The 5th and 7th do the healthy kids, and the 4th, 6th, and 8th do the LCAP. And what we're seeing is somewhat of an effect on our elementary students, but a real significant effect on our middle school. And so if you kind of look at this is the California Healthy Kids Survey, and they have a whole bunch of things that they consider their wellness indicators. And you're seeing that things are kind of moving in the wrong direction. So the red pieces that we've highlighted on here, is there enough counseling support for kids? And you'll see that the staff a year ago, which was interesting because that was right after COVID, we didn't see the full impact on kids because they came back to school, they got to see their friends, and there was kind of that bump there. We are seeing that residual impact right now. And so there's a lot more need for counseling support. And so part of our plan for next year is to have a social worker, behavioral interventionist full-time here at school, to add more counseling hours through our school psychologist. We've signed an agreement to bring back another social worker intern here at school. So we're looking at putting more resources and supports because the staff is saying right now, hey, you know, we don't have enough, even though we have more this year than we've had in the past. It's just not enough. And I would agree with that. Then the other piece that's really significant here is if you look at what the 7th grade students are saying, and they're basically saying, you know, 20% decrease of whether there's adequate supports for kids. You're seeing a 20% decrease in their feelings about bullying climate. You're seeing an increase of kids that have distress, decrease of kids that are optimistic, decrease of kids that are saying people are respectful of one another. All these indicators are real sad. There's more sadness when you kind of look at kids feeling connected to school. So if you look at this trend that we see here, you see a fairly consistent trend of our 5th graders, that blue line that's going across as far as kids feeling connected. When you look at our 7th graders, when kids came back to school, there was a bump in that connectedness, you know, 77 to 83%. Now it's down to 60% that are feeling strongly connected, which when you take a school like ours, that's one of the strengths of a school like ours, is that kids really can be connected. So there's definitely work to be done there. This is the other on the mental health piece.
Mr. Bars, I think you're muted.
All right. Verizon guy, can you hear me now? All right. Anyway, you can see on this, the fifth graders, you're seeing a bump from 2 years ago, about 8% were feeling this chronic sadness. You know, do you feel sad a lot of the time? Kind of a question. So you're seeing a bump among that. You're also seeing the chronic sadness bump in your seventh graders, about 10 percentage points up. The thing that's a little frightening is you're seeing a doubling of the number of kids who have had suicidal ideations, the kids who have contemplated suicide. So you're seeing this go from the 8 to 15%. So there's some real serious implications to some of this. We do have in place, and we've had for years, suicide awareness and suicide training for both staff and students that we do once a year. But it's a real market rise that is not localized to us. So if you've seen Summer Stephan, the district attorney, has had some initiatives because of this wellness issue. And she was really on the forefront about getting kids back to school and getting them back connected to supports. And this is showing that there's this residual effect among our kids. So it's a pretty sad thing.
I'd like to highlight from 2 slides ago, maybe not so much as the increase from the student's perception, but the disconnect between how the staff is feeling versus how the students, which to me is more troubling, right? Because the staff says, oh, we don't have a problem, and the students do. And that's maybe where you might want to investigate why there's discrepancy there.
Yeah. So for those who might not be able to hear it on the Zoom, Mr. Shire was highlighting the discrepancy between adult views and student views. And if you kind of look at this slide here, you see the discrepancy between what adults feel is there for kids, whether it's the staff or the parents in some cases, versus where the kids. And so there is, I would agree with you, a disconnect between, you know, the thing that stuck out to me was that optimism scale. And the optimism scale was a series of questions that was kind of hope for the future for your kids kind of thing, or the kids' own, you know, how optimistic am I am that things are going to be okay. And that was one that stuck out to me, because if you look at the staff, they're close to 100% on that scale. And you look at the parents, they went from 81 to 92% on that scale. And you look at the kids, they're down to that 49%. And they're not exactly phrased the same way, but they're designed to measure the same concept. But it's a really good point, because there is a disconnect on that awareness. And this is the reason why we show this data to our staff as well, because they need to see this is how the kids are feeling, and where is that not aligned. That's a really good point. So what do we kind of do about some of this? Because it's really serious stuff. When the LCAP was written, it's a 3-year plan, and we're going into the 2nd year. So this was written a year ago when we were kind of coming out of the lockdown stuff. And so we put into this plan this goal, which is new, because we didn't have a student wellness goal before. We had an academic goal, we had a safety goal, and we had a engagement goal, but we didn't have one of these. And so we put this in. Part of putting this in was what we're doing through this MTSS program, multi-tiered systems of support. And that is really designed to have clear structures on what are the what are the expectations for students' behavior? What are the interventions when students need it, to provide a little bit more stability of support. So if a kid really is struggling at school, how do we identify that kid is struggling? And how do we have reliable supports for those kids? We're doing 2 tiers on that. One is on the academic alignment, and the other is on the mental health. And we have the 3-year grant that we have through the County Office of Ed is designed primarily for the mental health side of that. I mentioned before, we are increasing our counseling and our mental health supports for next year. We also are seeing this manifesting in meanness online. So, you know, if you're old like me, you would see when you were in middle school, somebody would create some burn book and say something nasty about somebody and really hurt them. Now they're doing that electronically. And what's really difficult is we're seeing instances where students are creating an account, sharing those credentials through a disappearing app like a Snapchat, and then kids can anonymously go on and create this bullying type behavior towards kids without being able to track it or trace it back with any accuracy. It's rough. We've been able to, with parent and student support, be able to get to the bottom of some of these and have them shut down. But we realized we needed to get more on the front end of this. And what we hear from parents is, my kids know a whole lot more than I do. And so this Smart Social is a company that we're partnering with. You'll see within the next couple of weeks information out. And really what they do that's really unique is they're designed as a parent education group, and they educate parents on apps. So they basically have workshops on, this is how Snapchat works. This is how Instagram works. Okay, get your kid's phone out. This is how to find their secret accounts. This is how to know all this stuff. And so it's really super informative and super timely. So they come out, I think they have live monthly events, but they come out all the time and updating all this stuff. And so when something breaks, like the TikTok challenge that happened or some of those things, they immediately have stuff on there to both educate and give you tools. Super practical. So I think you guys are really like it.
What grade are you seeing the cyber really kick into full gear? And then what grade have you seen it at the youngest?
Yeah.
Where there's been a case that you can share with us.
Yeah. So the question was, where are we seeing kind of this cyberbully, this kind of online stuff happening? We see very little of it in the elementary. Part of it is less kids have access to it, and parents are much more vigilant of the use. The shutdown didn't help because things were opened up a lot. So we're seeing very little of it in the elementary. Occasionally you see something 4 or 5, but very, very rarely. We're seeing most of it in, I'd say, 7th, 8th grade. It varies, it kind of bumps around. What's interesting is sometimes we'll see a hot pocket in like 6th and 7th, but not see it in 8th. I think there's some maturity and some education perhaps that goes along with it. But yeah, it bumps between the different middle school grades. This year, we've seen most of it centered in the 7th grade. We're also, part of our LCAP was to put in digital citizenship training for the kids. And so our plan for next year, there's a Common Sense Media, we've used it in the past, has lessons, age-appropriate lessons for all ages on appropriate use online. And so that one is going to be directed to the kids. So we'll incorporate that into our lesson planning for next year. And then part of this wellness goal is to keep kids physically healthy. And so one of the changes that we made for last year was reallocating how our PE support was provided. So we continue to provide it to our middle school, but we also have PE support with a PE credentialed teacher to elementary as well. Right now, only 1 day a week. It's 2 days for middle school, 1 day for elementary. But we find that not only does it get delivered more consistently in frequency, but they engage in PE activities that are more aligned to standards and progress. So goal number 3, really tied to 3 main things. It's school safety, but it's pandemic response. How are we doing on that? How are kids safe, kids and staff safe here at school? And are we keeping the school up? You know, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary, but 20 years here. And if you've ever owned or lived in a house for 20 years or more, things start to break. And so part of that is designed to do that. So it was interesting on the pandemic response. Last year was the first time we ever asked this question. A lot of satisfaction on it. I think a lot of grace was given to say, I understand that we're doing your best you can do. And people felt pretty good about how we were handling it, at least satisfactory. Less so this year among teachers and especially middle school parents. We saw folks that, quite honestly, were ready to be done. A lot of politicization around how it was handled. Not necessarily here how it was handled, but regionally, statewide. And so people just got sick of it. And so we got to the point where people were done with it. It was unfortunately creating some divisiveness within our school community. And I'm happy that we have been able to move to a point now where there's less regulations, but kids are still healthy. It hasn't had the negative consequences that people were fearing. Because a lot of it really came from a a freedom fear dynamic. There was people really afraid, and rightfully so. It's a pandemic, and a lot of people had people that were affected in horrible ways. And then others were just ready to be done. And because of politics, we're not looking at it as a medical decision. So I'm glad that we've been able to get to a point that our school can kind of come back together a little bit and move on. And hopefully this won't be a question on next year's survey. Also have some safety questions, which is also interesting. Safety encompasses a lot. When we were asking this question back in 2020, prior to the pandemic, big focus we put on safety is, okay, do we have plans in place to protect kids if there's wildfire, or if there's an intruder on campus, or if there's some other threat to school? And when we rolled into the pandemic, ironically, people felt school was safer than it was prior to. But I think there was a lot of safety mitigations, and it was a lot more of a discussion than a talk. As we've moved into this current school year, you see very similar numbers. So people are feeling generally pretty good about the safety of the school, and that the school is a safe place to be. You see a slight dip between how your elementary parents and your middle school parents, about a 10% difference. And I think some of that goes to the stuff that Mr. Shire's question before. Some of it's a cyber type issue. Some of it's bullying type issues that people are concerned about that as a school, we take very seriously and address. So there's a little bit of difference on the safety view between the elementary and the middle. Then how's the school look? You know, for me, I've always been, and it's not an endorsement of politics, but I've always been a proponent of Rudy Giuliani's take on New York City, and that he was going to fix broken windows and bring up the quality of life and the quality of living, meaning you take care of your house and people are going to continue to take care of it. And so we spend a little bit more money than other schools on the upkeep of our school. You know, we want the school to look nice. It wants to look like we care about it. It wants to look like it's a welcoming place for our kids to come. And so we're pleased that for the most part, if you look at the appearance and maintenance of the school, you see some consistency from year to year, a little bit up and down, but for the most part, you're looking at about 90% of the people are happy with how this school looks. And like I said, it's become harder and harder to do and a little bit more expensive to do, but it is a priority for us to have a nice place for kids to learn. So as we move forward in this, we're looking at continuing proactive campus safety and security assessments, making sure we're going around, making sure that things are fixed. We will be investing a significant amount of money in playground repair. We had a playground inspector that came out, and we want to take a look at what things need to be replaced or fixed or tightened or whatever. So we're doing that. The big challenge is we've had some playground parts on order for about 6 months. So supply chain stuff on playground equipment is low, but we're moving forward on that. We're going to be investing some significant money in our alarm system repairs. Getting a lot of false alarms on our fire and burglar systems, and we can't have a alarm system that's kind of unreliable. It defeats the purpose. So we'll be doing some of that. We're also going to continue collaborative safety planning. I meet about once a month with Escondido police officers, the fire chief, and other school leaders in Escondido. And what we do is we talk about common issues and common plans. And so one of the things that we did through that committee was bring in Sandy Hook Promise, that has our Say Something program and our Start with Hello. You know, that was one of the things. And because we were able to do it collaboratively, we were able to develop a direct relationship with them and put that program into place. The committee, like I said, continues to meet. Really helpful to have the ear of local police and local fire, especially on preventative things, on things that we can do moving forward. And then the other thing that we're going to do more from a budgetary standpoint is continue to put contributions into both our preventive maintenance to make sure that things aren't breaking, and our deferred maintenance, so we know things are going to. And so we're putting a bunch of money into there with the goal of having enough money in these accounts so that when big things happen, it doesn't programmatically impact the kids. So, and then our last goal is really our parent engagement goal. And when you look at this one, predictably in 2021, when we wouldn't let parents come to school, we had a lot less parents coming to school. And so you see that 2021 mark of what was nice is parents felt, hey, I'm still involved and they're encouraging me to be involved, but I haven't attended school stuff or served as volunteers, and even a decrease in participating in conferences, when they weren't in person. What we're seeing in 2022 is a return towards where we were before. What we're seeing is in people who are attending school events, we've had about 80% of respondents attended school events. About 60% were actually volunteering at school. And we were back up to almost 90% that were participating in those conferences. One of the things holding us back is vaccine mandate. People have told us, I don't want to test and I don't want to get a vaccine. And so when that goes away, I'll come back and help you out. And so there's a little bit along those lines. But I think this ability to have parents come back with a little bit more freedom. The other thing we were doing earlier is, even in the beginning of this year, was restricting the number of volunteers that could come in and so forth. So we had things in place to try to keep school open and people safe that really were kind of opposite of this. So we're moving in the right direction on that. We also asked, how do you feel about communication? And so in the communication piece, you'll see the blue line in the middle is all parents that were surveyed. The yellow line at the top is your elementary parents, and your green line is your middle school parents. And so what you're seeing is a slight decrease in all categories on satisfaction of communication. Part of that was parents got very in tune with communication when they were the teachers. So there was a lot. And fortunately, people were happy about it, because if not, that would have created a lot of problems. But we are seeing a little bit of leveling of some of those, and less satisfaction on the middle school side. Part of that's inherent in design, in the sense that elementary has one teacher that you're communicating with, middle school has multiple. But I think part of it is area that we need to look at, as far as how are we communicating with all of our parents, even if there's multiple teachers involved. And we're not so big that it should have that much of a discrepancy. So we're looking at that. And then there was also a question on, how do you feel about school communications and things that are coming out from the school? We've seen fairly consistent marks throughout this. This is one where we asked our teachers, our classified staff, and our parents. I see fairly consistent marks across the board among this. Staff is about 80–85%, parents around low 90s. And then when we look at what does this mean for us, is we really want to re-engage our parents. We want to get parents back connected. 80%, probably higher than just about any school around as far as volunteers. But for us, we want to get it back so that all parents feel welcome to be engaged with their kids. Our kids do better the more that parents are involved and partnering with us. So we want to re-engage them. We still want to take a look at communications, make sure we improve our communications, especially on the middle school side. And then the other part of this goal is the partnership goal, as far as growing partnerships. And we've got amazing partnership with a safari park, San Diego Zoo Global, and they've been phenomenal through the pandemic. I expected that when things shut down, they would shut down, and they did digital lessons throughout. They're back out on campus multiple days a week, talking to them about summer school options to see if we can set up some sort of a camp with them. So they're fabulous. We also have partnerships that we're developing, and one of those is one with Palomar Health. And so I went out and met with one of the outreach doctors. He was the anesthesiologist and outreach guy. I'm like, it seems like a weird combination, but so I met with him, and they really want to do some reach out with schools. And so the first step in that is we have them coming out in May. They're meeting with one of our 6th grade classes, and they're going to talk about diagnostics and teach kids, blood pressure stuff and this and that, and we'll get to track certain things and so forth. What I really want and like is part of our discussion was getting the kids out to the hospital setting, the new hospital setting, and them showing them all of these tools as far as, their imaging rooms and their treatment rooms and what intensive care looks like and all this kind of stuff. They seemed really open to it, because my goal is, one of the things we've seen in these surveys is kids are saying, yeah, I like school, but I don't do anything that makes a difference. Or I don't do anything that, when am I ever going to use this in my life, kind of thing. And one of the goals of these partnerships is to open kids' eyes as the possibilities of what they could be doing or who they could be. And so their goal is to outreach, to put pipelines into the healthcare system so people will want to do those jobs. So it seems like a really good fit. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at as far as that goes. And then the last 2 slides I have is we ask people, what can we do to make SPU better? And what are some things that you really value about it? And this was just a straight up computer program that was an algorithm that took words, and the more often the words were mentioned, the bigger it showed up, or the more likely it was to show. And so some of these don't make a ton of sense when you see them. I don't know if you can see them all up there. But if you kind of look at it, the things that highlight as far as, what can you make it better? A lot of the things that we got, and this is a conglomerate of the students we asked, the teachers we asked, the classified staff, and the parents. And so a lot of things that came out was nothing, everything's great. I'd like to believe that, but there's always room for improvement. But there was a lot of that. Some other things that people were talking about is making sure that we put a focus on students and student wellness, like whole child student stuff. That was something that people wanted us to do. Teachers, teacher development, and teacher curriculum and all those kind of things. There was a lot of things about middle school as far as improving middle school. There was talk about elementary feels one way and middle school feels another. Some of that's going to be inherent just in the design of curriculum, but there is room for improvement there. Admin was up there. There's some things about either communications, or there was, at the time, some concerns about the politics of how things were going. So some interesting things that came out in that. What's the best thing about SPU? A lot of stuff in there about school feeling like a community, like feeling like people could really belong. We want to make sure that all kids feel that way, though. So we've got some work around that. The dedication of the teachers, students obviously put a lot of things in there about coming to see their friends and spending time with their friends. The campus and the campus upkeep and the feel when people come. So those are all some things that people were talking about as far as what they feel good about here at the school. Strong leadership was in there. But that's kind of the recap. Like I said, it's a lot of information here. There's a whole lot more. But what I wanted to do is to show you that the information that you share with us and the partnership what we have with you guys is essential in us being able to serve the kids. So I want to thank you for that first. But are there any questions? Some questions come out? Okay. It looks like some may have shown up in the chat. Okay. So there's, will there be new programs for gifted or advanced students? We are looking at that right now. We're looking right now as to how can we incorporate some additional programming in. Our recent talks have been on middle school electives, because middle school electives have been all over the board over the last few years, because when we hit the pandemic, school had shut down and we focused on core. And then when we came back, we couldn't mix kids. And so that changed. And then we had change in staffing in middle school, and electives have to be credential based. So we are looking at the gifted and advanced. There's no longer gifted and talented programs like there used to be, or at least not funding streams for them. But we are looking at how we can serve kids, because that was another thing that came out in the survey, was that there's a lot of focus on remediation, but there's not focus on the other end. Part of that's inherent in how schools are funded. So part of it's going to be a funding issue. But we are looking at how we can enrich and challenge kids on both ends, because all kids deserve the right intervention, and all kids deserve that next step. So we don't have anything concrete yet on that, but that is part of our discussion as far as what we're looking at for next year. Any plans to revitalize the softball fields? I'd say yes and no. The softball fields became Gopher Haven. And so it got to the point of maintenance, and we no longer have a softball team. So we used to have a softball team, and those fields were maintained with the team here. The league that we play in no longer has softball, so we don't have a team. And between the maintenance and no teams, that back half of the playground, or back third of the playground, we just aren't maintaining right now. There is talk. I'm scheduled to meet with the athletic director of Classical Academy, who is talking about perhaps a joint use agreement where They create soccer fields out there and renovate softball fields for permission to use them. So it could be a moneymaker for us and also, improve that area. So we don't at the moment, but we could. And then there's some people that have approached us last year who did some work out on the fields to improve them so that they can use them for their team. So we're open to that. So if that question is, hey, I'd come fix them if I can use them, come talk to me. But we don't have a current use for us right at the moment. And then vandalism issues, has that been resolved? And so we had some significant vandalism issues about two to 3 years ago, which included folks painting on the front of the schoolhouse, which was really terrible. And then a little bit of vandalism on the inside of the campus. Since then, we've added more cameras to the campus. We've added lights to the campus. So there's some lights that are motion lights that will come on with when people walk by. And we have some lights now that are photosensitive lights that come on and stay on all night. And they're solar, so they're not costing us much money on there. But we found since we took some of these mitigation strategies, we're not seeing that type of vandalism. What we're seeing, though, is a handful of bathroom vandalism. Kids taking wet toilet paper and throwing it on the ceiling, or pulling off the soap dispenser, or that kind of stuff. That's a challenge for us to monitor because adults can't be hanging out in the bathroom and watching kids. And so that's a little bit of a challenge, but we aren't seeing the outside vandalism that we've seen in the past. And then there's another question that plans to add additional activities like choir, band, and theater. If we look at that, yes, Mrs. Reed Smith, and we were just talking about it recently, she has led our choir and the theater type group. She is doing theater with middle school in the VAPA class, and then she is doing performances with the elementary as part of her SEL position. But this is almost suggesting kind of like extracurricular type stuff. So yeah, we are looking to bring that back. We're going to connect with Bertrand's regarding the band. That question came up last time, and that was one of the things that we have planned for the summer to try to see if there's a possibility to do it. In the past, we ran into problems with the band. We had the band, but we didn't have enough of an interest for people to continue. They do go and do school programs. The band issue is a little challenging because it requires a person that can do it, enough people interested, and then there's usually a pretty significant expense depending what type of band you're putting together. There was a question about golf. The league that we play in does not have golf, but I will put a note in there to talk to the golf course to see if they want to do any kind of after school programming. I know that most kids who are interested in golf, there's a junior golf association where there's a nominal fee and kids can go out, play for $5. And so there's a real cheap entry point into that. We don't have any staff to oversee that at the moment, but we're hiring a whole lot of new staff. So some of the challenges on these is people who have expertise in that area to run it. Spanish class option, yes, I would say we're hoping. We are hiring 2 new middle school teachers. We're hoping that one of them has Spanish proficiency because we're looking at, as part of our elective options, we'd like to be able to offer a Spanish option within day. We did, was it last year that did the Spanish after school? Year before? Yeah, so before COVID, we had offered a Spanish after school program. We had strong interest at the beginning and then it faded out, right? Yeah, so we did have a Spanish option after school that we didn't have enough interest to sustain it. But in middle school, we're looking at making that one of our electives if we can get a Spanish speaking teacher. Is that all the questions so far? Okay, and if there's more, if I didn't answer your question, please put it back in the chat. Real quick, couple kind of one-hit items. CASP testing, the big state testing, is coming up next week, starts up. Usually takes about 2 weeks of testing, about a week of makeups. So you'll see some information from Mrs. Lee. Next week is a little bit of 4th and 5th grade, and most of middle will be doing their state testing, and they'll take tests in language arts and math. Grades 3 through 8 take language arts and math, and 5 and 8 take a science test. So you'll see mostly upper elementary and middle next week, and mostly 3rd through 5th grade, whatever they need to finish the week following. But we'll give you all that stuff about, eat a good breakfast and get sleep and all the stuff they should do before a normal day. But we'll do those tests next week. We do have a lot of events coming up here. On May 6th, we have our Cinco de Mayo celebration, which we're calling Seis de Mayo because it's on a Friday. And we're taking a break from testing that day to do that. And it's we used to do some nighttime events, bring a whole lot of people together who all brought potluck stuff together, which probably is not advisable right now. So we're doing an event that's really focusing on the kids. And so their parents are welcome for the first hour of the day. The kids have been working on dancing. Mrs. Barber has been working with all these kids on dancing. So 8:45 to 9:45, we're going to have the dances. You're welcome to come in. If you are staying for the event, it would need to be as a volunteer, and we need to go through that volunteer stuff. But the spectators can come for that first hour and watch the dancing if you want. Friday, May 6th, so that same night, PTO having movie night here. Movie night, they had it a long time ago as a mother-son movie night, so looking to kind of replicate that as a PTO movie night. And then the following weekend, Saturday the 14th, is the Sweetheart Dance. And so that was formerly Daddy-Daughter Dance. Be more inclusive, it's now the Sweetheart Dance, and that's May 14th. Anything you want to add on PTO events, Ms. Vitale? Yes. Yes, excellent. So yes, that is next week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and information went out on ways that you could recognize your child's teachers. PTO has some great events to do it here at school, but there's some stuff that you can participate in as well. Apparently we forgot to pay the bills. Yes, at the end of May 26th is our TK through 5th grade open house. So it's time for elementary students to come in, check out the classrooms and see the stuff that your kids have been working on all year. And then June 9th is our last day of school, which is 42 days away. Not that anyone's counting that. No, not school days, not school days. The school day countdown's in the staff lounge somewhere, but yeah, so we're coming down the last month or so. So we are coming down the home stretch of the year. Couple programs I want to tell you about. I talked to you guys earlier about summer programs that we have, for we're doing a summer program this year for special education, our English learners, reading and math support focused in primary ages. But there's also a new program called Extended TK or Extended PK or UPK, Universal Pre-Kindergarten. Few names to it, but basically what it is we currently have a transitional kindergarten for students that turn 5 years old about within 2 months of the cutoff. So the cutoff to come to school is September 2nd. You got to be 5 by September 2nd. You come to school and be in kindergarten. They extended that date for what they call transitional kindergarten to December 2nd. So right now, if a kid's birthday is December 2nd, they turn 5 by December 2nd, they're placed in TK. The state is incrementally extending that date over the next few years. So this coming school year, if they turn 5 by February 2nd of the following year, so February 2nd, 2023, that child will be eligible for TK. And then the following year it becomes April 2nd, and then the following year it goes out to June. So within a few years, we'll have 10 grades here instead of the 9. You'll have a TK, which will be a full grade. Then you'll have the kindergarten and then the rest of the grades. So it's essentially, for folks that were putting their kids, 4-year-olds into preschool, it's essentially a paid preschool that's integrated within the school system. So that'll be expanding. So you'll see that coming up. So if you have younger ones, congratulations, you hit the jackpot. Me, I missed it. Wanted to tell you real quick about board elections too. The board recently switched from open elections to election by trustee areas. And what that means is that there was some civil rights laws that went in that said that a public governing board, whether it's a school board or a hospital board or other board, supervisory board, they had to break into trustee areas so that instead of electing your board, everybody who lives in that whole area elects all the members. It's now narrowed down to there's 5 areas that the district is broken into. And if you live within that 5 area, when you live within a certain area, you elect that person from that area. So there'll be less kind of choices, more narrowed election. And the reason they did that was there was demographically diverse regions, especially bigger ones. Ours, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but there's demographically diverse regions. And so it allowed more voting power for more groups. And so it was civil rights law. So you'll see when the elections come up for board members, we currently have 4 of the 5 board members will be in some form of an election as we come up. So be a lot of that. You'll see your election choices will be limited to your trustee area. And one of the last things I want to talk to you guys about is job opportunities at SPU. We love when people come and volunteer for free, but we do pay a lot of people here too. So there are some job opportunities coming up. We do have positions that are opening up within this school year. So we have an administrative assistant position, which is the assistant to the superintendent. So Pamela is deserting me this year. So, but she's staying on to the end. Yeah, she's staying on to the end of the school year. But we'd love to hire a wonderful person to fill that position prior to, so that we can cross-train a little bit. So we're that position, I'm going to get a little bit more information out on it today, but that position will fly until next Friday. And please let Pamela know if you're interested in that job, and we'll do interviews on that the following week. So 6 de Mayo is when that position closes. We're also looking now for instructional aides, so classroom aides. We're still short some instructional aides here at school. We can hire those now. And then for next year, we're looking for bus drivers. So anybody out here, bus driver, we will take bus drivers. We will pay you to get trained as a bus driver. So if you want to be a bus driver, looking for bus drivers. We are looking for 2 middle school language arts teachers. We are filling language arts positions in middle school. Again, instructional aides, playground aides we'll be looking for next year, and then before and after school staff. So other than the teacher positions, all of those have some part-time opportunities. So if you're interested in any of those, please let us know, and we'll continue to get some information and applications out. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that yesterday or the day before, we found out that the school district won the Pivotal Practice Award from the state of California. So like they used to do, I know, it's a good one. Sounds weird, but it's a good one because it's the state hands out distinguished school awards. And so this year, or over the last 2 years, they put the Distinguished School Award on hold, and they had this award called Pivotal Practice Award. And it's basically, what special thing are you guys doing for your kids in this time? And there was 4 categories, and they had to do with like nutrition and distance learning and this, that kind of stuff. And ours was really focused on student engagement and responsiveness. And it really talked about how when we shut down for a day and then had distance learning up the next day. And it was a real testament to the teachers here. And that when we had legal authority to walk the kids back through the door, we started doing that on the first day we could do that. And so it was really on how responsive our school was, and we were recognized with that award. So they're sending us a flag to display at the school. So we'll see what that looks like. Usually you got a piece of paper, so we'll see what it's like. So we were really honored by that. So that just came out. So you'll hear some more information on that. And I think that's all I have. Oh, we also had Mr. Mani in the chat. Thank you very much. Was saying some nice things about the work that our staff and administration have done the last couple of years. So thank you very much for that. So is there anything else that you guys have? Was there something that you came in saying, hey, I need to know? Anything from Foundation you wanted to share? Okay. Yeah, so if Foundation and PTO, very, very active. I know that they're both recruiting right now. So if you have an interest in joining the PTO does a lot of our school-based activities, does our book fairs and our lunches on the lawn and our teacher appreciation and a lot of direct impact on the campus. Our foundation raises a lot of money to do programmatic and school improvements. And I know that when we talk about the thing we talked about the other day, or is that not yet? Okay, so they are raising some money to do some good things with it. In the past, they really supported some programs, you know, like our music and our PE and our art and our library that we couldn't have done without them. And so they're raising some good money now. So if you want to be part of those two groups, please let me know. And we're also reconstituting for next year our Red Barn Arts and our Sage Garden. So if you're interested in those types of things, we'll actually have some summer work that we're doing this summer to put some instructional components and build out our garden a little bit. So if you want to do that, we've got some volunteer work over the summer for that as well. So, all right. Anything else that we missed? All right. Well, thank you guys for spending time. I'm happy to say that things are looking a lot brighter than they were the last time we had this chat. And I'm hopeful we'll see similar improvements next time. So thank you very much for joining us. If you did miss some of it, like I said, within about 24 hours, we'll have this up on YouTube. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to or anything you want to talk with me about, please let me know. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
I didn't